Alright, my name is Tranquil Bent. This is my ethnography. My crime was graffiti, and I did it on March 15th at 9:45 a.m. on University Ave, riding the Green Line up and down. A couple things that I thought were interesting was, as I walked down to the Green Line from my dorm, I took some notes along the way, and almost every stop sign had some type of graffiti marking on it. And actually, I went on another day and they had covered those, so that was pretty interesting. There were still some stickers on the back of them, of course.
Victoria Street Station. Connect here to Route 16.
A lot of the stop signs and other objects had pretty consistent graffiti on them like that. And this, I thought it was confusing. Why would they put that on a clear surface? But anyway, here's another example of stickers. That's another form of graffiti. And I think this symbol, because there are 3 letters, it probably has some type of gang association. When it's a word or a phrase, it's more considered an individual that's making these marks, but if it's typically 3 to 5 letters, it's probably some type of gang association, which I thought was interesting after doing a little bit of research on that. So to start talking about the pillars, Pillar 1 is social sustainability. So basically this means that sustainability includes understanding human well-being, human rights, and equity, and the democratic government. Not democratic as in like political views, but rather inclusion of all voices in a democratic civil society. The application of this is that graffiti is not socially sustainable because it is not democratic. In a civil society where all voices are heard, I am certain that a person or persons who owns the property that is being defaced would not agree with the person who is defacing it about their actions. If it is a public property, then it does not mean it is free game for either, so to speak. Public property being defaced has a high impact on the community because it indicates that there are people in the community that do not respect public property, and this is a bit unsettling in and of itself. And if they don't respect the public space that they share, then how can they respect others? This was an interesting example, I thought. In all of those red squares, there's individual graffiti, and above the doorway they had painted over it. I just thought it was pretty intense that people had actually climbed up there and done that to deface that property. That takes some dedication. I don't know what that was about, but just an interesting observation, I suppose. To keep talking about the application. So, it could also make people believe that they live in an unsafe community, which is also unsettling and not good. Some things we could do to change this is if graffiti were used to facilitate democratic government or giving everyone an equal voice, then it would have a potential of becoming a socially sustainable, but it does not, so I don't think that there is a way for graffiti to be socially sustainable. In the second pillar, we talk about environmental sustainability. So the definition of that is that it includes wise use of renewable resources, minimizing use of non-renewable resources, and using effective waste management. So just really understanding the resources that you have and not necessarily wasting them. I think in the case with graffiti that they're wasting the resources of the paint, and they're also wasting the resources of the people who own those buildings, because they have to overpaint it and repaint it, and sometimes that has to do with taxpayer dollars, and I don't think that's very justifiable. Anyway, graffiti is wasteful, and the property does need to be repainted or painted over that single spot to cover up the graffiti. And this is a very wasteful cycle and not in any way environmentally sustainable. If graffiti is done to revive old buildings or some other recreational positive application, then in a way it could be environmentally sustainable, but it is a bit of a stretch. I'm not sure about that, but possibly in the future it could be. Another thing to talk about is the third pillar, which is economically prosperous. The definition includes efficient use of capital, so like natural, human, physical, or intangible capital, equitable distribution of wealth and resources, and the capacity to create well-being for all, and having efficient markets. So I don't think that graffiti is at all equitable for almost anyone involved. The application is that graffiti is in no way an effective use of capital, and it wastes product and monetary capital for those affected by the crime. So people who own buildings have to pay to get them repainted, and it's just a waste of capital that shouldn't have had to happen to begin with.
Victoria Street Station. Connect here to Route 16.
Dale Street. At my old house. Just call. I'm gonna call your phone. Just send me.
Dale Street Station. Connect here to routes 16 and 65.
Another thing to take notice is that graffiti in no way is an efficient use of capital, as it wastes product and monetary capital for those affected by the crime. However, some may argue that the act is economically prosperous for gangs associated with those making tags and graffiti marks, almost like a sense of advertising, I suppose you could argue. This case is also wrong because it does not have the capacity to create well-being for all. In fact, the wealth and resources is limited to those illegal groups at the expense of others, and this goes against the third pillar because the third pillar very clearly states that for an act to be economically prosperous, it must have the capacity to create well-being for all, and the act of graffiti does not. To change this, if graffiti was a marketable act, then it could potentially be economically prosperous for several parties and help stimulate the economy. So if someone were to hire someone else to graffiti the side of a building or something like that, for marketing purposes, I suppose there could be some sort of stimulus there, but really it's not sustainable. If there was an efficient, then there's no reason for it not to be prosperous, but I don't see an application where graffiti would be prosperous necessarily.